Whether the purpose of a writer be to set forth a record of actual happenings or to present a purely imaginative creation, the easiest possible way to relate to a story as it is to read one is to begin at the beginning and tell it. I need scarcely to remind my readers that I am not a novelist nor a literatus, but a plain businessman, totally unversed in the art of weaving fabrics of fancy and romance. My sole purpose in the presentation, what follows in these pages, is to bring together the silent facts of career, which, though marred by much failure, has been marked undeniably by a measure of honorable achievements. I propose therefore to start the story at the point at which I started my life's journey, and in so far as ability permits, to recite the facts without equivocation. I am proud to reckon myself as a Hooser, the eldest of 9 children. I was born 53 years ago in a little log cabin in Tipton Country, Indiana. My father and mother were and still are strict Seventh day Adventists. Both are still living in a green old age near a town in Cicero, Indiana, not far away from a finely equipped school, which the denomination to which they have given a lifelong allegiance has built for the purpose of inculcating in the minds of their children and tenants of its faith. In that faith, stem, rigid, uncompromising, I was reared and grew to manhood, although I have a long ago reached and passed that place where personal subscriptions to its claim and teachings are at all possible to me. Yet I am quite persuaded that from much that was set before me in the childhood, I have never been able to wholly depart. Leaving the question of filial validity entirely to a side for a moment, I have no choice but to pay tribute to the utter sincerity and the unswerving loyalty of what they believed, to which my parents and those associated with them exhibited. Sincerity and loyalty appraised altogether. Apart from any religious affiliation, whatsoever were virtues of the first water, jewels in the crown of the race, and the people with whom my early years were spent possessed and exemplified them in altogether extraordinary way. Then there comes the great and sterling character of my parents. No story of my early years can possess any meaning unaccompanied by a full acknowledgement for it, nor has any influence it exerted perished from my life. To be sure, there were years, it appeared to be the lost years, when sin and degradation closed in about me, but it was only hidden and covered with the increment of wrong living and wrongdoing. Now that these impediments have cleared away, that the seed has now borne fruit, and my life has become at least something of worth, not only to myself but also to my fellow men, especially to my mother, do I desire to pay tribute. I cannot think of her without deep sense of reverence. During my entire lifetime, I never knew her to tell a lie, nor to equivocate in my way, to believe a thing to be right. Moreover, what meant to her was the doing of it, regardless the character of the consequences. Had she lived in the days of religious persecution, she doubtless would have been a martyr, or any such thing as a denial or a betrayal of her belief never so much as crossed her mind. A God given privilege, that of being in a position to mold the lives of husband and children. Men's folk are best at a wayward creatures and prone to err. No one of us is without room of such enhancement and enrichment of character as only the influence of a good woman can impact. My own recollection of the early days is that such proved as a case in my family. With marvelous and unwearying patience, my mother strove to warn us from all sorts of weaknesses and shortcomings, to foster in us the light regard for honor, truth, and righteous dealing, and the desire to aim, at least in part, to emulate her own fire resolves and high spiritual achievements. To foster in us a regard for honor, truth, and righteous dealing, and the desire to aim, at least a part, to stimulate her own fine resolves and high spiritual achievements. With her duty and legitimate relation thereto, religion and her acceptance and profession thereof meant something more than mere acquittance, with or mental subscription to a set of rules or a code of ethics. It meant the living of a life. Undoubtedly, my mother was a striking example of the one who was undoubtedly right, precising with the same sense of every 9 out of 10 of us was wrong. She was entirely free from making initial mistakes and treating religion as just a side of her being. With her, it was everything. She furnished a continual reproof to all those who allow habits, obedience, occasional prayers, conventionality, and Sunday church going to become a substitute for an out and out profession of faith. It would be a great boon to humanity if the freedom that marks almost every phase of modern life, that is to set men and women free from all sorts of hoary, time-worn convictions, would set them free in these regards also. For that kind of religious practice, I have described simply a mirage of that real things, and not even a true mirage. For that, at least, is a representation of the formality that has no correspondence with the reality at all. If Christianity be simply reckoned as one among world's many religious systems, then maybe such make-believe might pass muster. For the other systems recognize religion as something appealing for the man's manifold activities. But Christianity is not among such religion. If these be the religions, I write in no spirit of history or exclusiveness. If these are the religions, or what religions actually mean, then Christianity is not a religion at all. We must abandon old, mistaken, and useless word. If the word religion belongs to an attitude, for example, separate a man's political actions or business methods, then he is supposed to confess with no sense. Is that Christianity a religion at all? My mother made no such foolish, untenable profession. For her, earth has no stronghold of mechanism for which the spirit has found no place. For her, it was a place in which God dwelt. She lived as under his all-seeing eye. A place of struggle, zest, and hope are the parts of the soul's daily need, yet a place in which one knew the urge and passion of service, of the satisfaction of the tasks honorably and steadfastly undertaken, of duty bravely and nobly done. Grim days, these days for her at times, when the toil of life seemed utterly barren, and those about her uncomprehending as the stones of the road. But she never turned aside, and my memory of her, as she lived and moved among the common experiences of daily life, is the memory of a true and a beautiful mother soul. Moreover, it is my deep, unalterable conviction that the influence of my mother not only shaped my father's life and made him a grand old patriarch, but also formed and furnished the foundation upon which I have been reared in those later years. The structure of my life's well-intentioned service. May Cornel Stubber, who some time ago visited my mother, wrote in an article afterwards concerning her, I noted this woman's firmness and tenderness. She feels her belief in the religion being truth. Everything else must give precedence, as she devotes herself to the religion and his son devotes himself to his business. Each has found God, the mother in the church and the son in the religion of business and humanity. I asked the mother that what were the chief characteristics she remembered of her son in the childhood. Well, she replied, he was truthful. Here she paused and smiled. Except once. Mrs. Nash laughed girlishly and happily. Yes, he always told the truth, except once, and that was when he bought a pocket knife. I told him that he can't keep the one, I knew I saw him using one. He made no efforts to hide it. He never hid anything. Then I asked, from where did he get that pocket knife? I haven't any, he said, slowly putting that knife inside his pocket. Yes, you have one. From where did you get it? Oh, I bought it. How much did you give for it? A quarter. You gave 75 cents for this knife, Arthur? Yes, this is the cost. Well, why didn't you say so? Oh, I knew that you'd know. Well, how much I gave for this knife? Well, it was not like George Washington, but it came close to it, as a real youngest ever come. Such was the character and such the influence of the women under whose guidance I spent my early years, that such a character and such an influence should fail utterly in bringing something of real worth to fruition in the lives of our children is unthinkable. That it has done so in any case, I humbly and gratefully acknowledge. The power and the pull of those dear Indiana days are with me still. I pray to God that they may never depart out of my life. I do not today regard Adventism as a creed to which I can give my allegiance is, in this connection, entirely, by the way, the chief thing which, of my early training, I have been able to retain is this. The first essential thing for a man who deserves to make success to his religion is the moral straightforwardness that takes it seriously and realizes that it is not a thing to be trifled with or played at, a hobby to be taken up because it happens to agree with one's temperament or is bound up with his family history, but a mode of life which is given a bearing that is absolutely useless and meaningless on the whole of life, for a significance to its every part, something that has to be translated for everyday terms of conduct and behavior. In addition to the fundamental honesty to heart toward this thing of spirit, I still retain hold on the principle on which I was given the first glimpse of the early Hoosier days. If the heart has to be honest, it must be good. Here I am employing this word in this special sense. That does not exactly mean the same as honesty, but rather a quality of character without which religion's honesty is often, if not always, quite impossible. It is a word that evangelist Luke appears to have been especially fond of, and it indicates a certain robust and courageous quality that stands out finely, in contrast to rather academic sort of piety, or often monopolizes the name. It is the goodness that has pluck to run risks, to endure the hardness like a good soldier, to venture a good deal. Everything else, if necessary, for the sake of loyalty and conviction. What Luke tells us, for an instance, that Joseph of Arimathea was a good man and a just. And he also tells us that the Barnabas was a good man and full of Holy Ghost. He selects a couple of men who were outstanding and peculiar examples of moral courage. Both men, as the stories plainly indicates, were the men to be depended on, who could be trusted to what they deemed to be the right thing, with a certain reckless discard of the consequences. It is a long arc from the dawn time of Christianity to the year of grace 1923. Yet we may wager our way existence on the fact now as then, if a man has to make success to his religion, if it is to tell for anything at all, he must not only have honesty of conviction, but courage. In fact, he cannot really have the former without the latter. Safety first. Maybe the excellent rule of the road, but a poor one for the Christian journey. Moral timidity brings forth no perfect fruit. These were the qualities that made my home folks and their immediate associates. I had ample of opportunity to witness them exercised again and again. Nothing daunted, nothing fearing. These simple people formed steadily along their way. I grew up, I repeat, among them, reached the man state. Constantly their example before my eyes. The effect it wrought is still with me, and it keeps, as I trusted ever will, to my face turned toward one, to whose all pondering mind a noble aim, faithfully kept, is as a noble deed, in whose pure sight all virtues doth succeed.